afternoon. I'm here today to talk about our assignment 3, Future Technology of Learning. My name is Josh Mesha, and this is for INT7213 with Professor Patrick Mach. Just to go over the agenda real quick, I'm going to start by introducing 4 primary learning styles that I used for this assignment. We're going to kind of parlay that into application development methodologies. Then we're going to kind of step away from the presentation for a second, and we're going to go over to Modomo, and I'm going to show you comparison and contrast of learning styles and application development methodologies through the use of a concept map that I developed. We're going to then kind of turn to the second part of this assignment, which was the brain stimulation via biotechnologies. I'm going to give you an introduction. We're going to go over the benefits, the risks. I'll wrap it up with a conclusion, take questions, and I'll show you my references page. So moving on to the primary learning styles, I'm going to go into more detail with my mind map, but just to give you kind of an overview of the 4 styles I used, visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic. And I'm going to show you kind of each one of these in depth, but I just want to give you a quick overview of those. Same thing with the application development methodologies. These are kind of the few that I've learned so far at LTU. We're going to go through agile methods. We're going to talk about joint application development, or JAD, and we're also going to go through the systems development lifecycle, or the SDLC. So we are going to go ahead and switch over to Modomo real quick, and we'll go ahead and start the session. So this is my mind map I created, and today we're going to be talking about human learning, and it's the comparisons and contrasts it has with application development methodology. So we're going to swing on over to the first learning style, and that's visual learning. And basically visual learning is, as it says, visual, but the basis behind this is to connect relationships between the ideas using various tools and cues. Visual learners visualize ideas and concepts easier, and it makes, when they can see something, it helps them to comprehend it better. So when you're trying to cater to a visual learner, you want to use things such as charts and graphics to kind of tailor to this learning style. Moving over to our next one is auditory learning, and again, the name is kind of self-explanatory, but it basically deals with hearing information versus seeing it. So these learners like to hear information better, and it helps them to retain information when they recite the information out loud so they can hear themselves repeating it back to you, and this helps them better retain it. And as I said again, repeating this information back to the presenter or the teacher helps them to retain the information better than visual learning. The third one is reading and writing, and this kind of goes along with the interaction with text. And to kind of further explain on that, it's the annotation really is key here, note taking, and kind of reading, rereading, and kind of just comprehending it through reading and writing it versus seeing it or hearing it. And again, written assignments and quizzes are best for this learning style, especially when trying to test comprehension. The last style I want to talk to you about is the kinesthetic learning, and this is hands-on and or experimental, and this kind of goes by the old adage that you can learn best by doing and kind of getting your hands dirty and getting down to everything. Role playing is huge for kinesthetic learning. It helps them really kind of jump into character and helps them get down to the meat and potatoes of really what's trying to be taught. So those are the 4 learning styles. We're going to go over 3 application development methodologies that I highlighted in the beginning of the presentation now. The first one I wanted to talk to you about is agile methodology. And agile methodology is basically highlighted by the software being developed in very short iterations, 2 to 3 week periods, where it's kind of a cycle of requirements are laid out, program is written, program is debugged, the product is shown to the customer, the client, they kind of put their input in, and then it kind of goes back again to the software side, and it kind of just goes in these development cycles until the project is finished. Very little documentation is actually ever written down. It's a lot of face-to-face communication. So this kind of is best suited for visual and auditory learning because there is face-to-face communication, so you're hearing and seeing them a lot. Also, there's very little documentation, so it's all visual and auditory. So the next one I want to highlight is the joint application development methodology, and nickname is JAD. Basically, this is kind of like Agile in the sense that the end users, executive management, and developers are all kind of meeting face to face, except these sessions where they're meeting are called JAD sessions, and they're a lot longer and more formal than the agile sessions. So a JAD session can be 2 to 3 days long, and you have very few of them, maybe one or two for the entire cycle of the project. So the JAD kind of shortens development times, and it has been known to get greater satisfaction from clients. But the success of JAD really depends on the hands-on leadership and the participation by everyone involved. Everyone has to buy into this type of methodology. So this naturally is best for kinesthetic learning because they are able to dive right into it, kind of get their hands dirty and get involved right on the ground level and kind of just be in the middle of everything. And that's kind of in contrast, visual and auditory learning. This is more of just a hands-on thing versus seeing and hearing things. So the last methodology I want to highlight was the systems development lifecycle. This is more traditional, and it's used extensively in project management realm, and it kind of deals in 6 different steps. There are different iterations, but the most common model is the 6-step method. And the first step is planning. Next, you have the analysis of the current system and the ways that can be improved. Then the system is designed and kind of reviewed. After the design is signed off on, there's implementation and deployment of the system, followed by an extensive process of testing the system, followed by the integration into the normal business processes. So the SDLC is pretty much tailored to the reading and writing style of learning because there's so much documentation. Meetings might be multiple weeks apart, so you may not get that face-to-face or those visual cues as much, and there's a lot of documentation and writing things down, reciting it back, kind of going through that whole process. So this is best tailored to the reading and writing style. So that was the mind map. We're going to swing back over real quick to the rest of the presentation. So going to the second requirement of this assignment, I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to brain stimulation via the biotechnologies. So brain stimulation ultimately involves producing electrical impulses that affect targeted areas of the brain, and this can be done using electrodes as well as there's other methods. Brain stimulation currently can be used to help treat neurological disorders, as well as it's starting to begin to move into the kind of enhancement and learning side of things as well. So as we move into the next generation of biotechnologies, brain stimulation is really going to come to the forefront of all the hype behind the biotechnologies. And kind of, as I was saying previously, there are new ways of learning can be recognized by studying the way our brains react to different degrees of stimulation, and this can help us either improve on traditional learning methods or introduce new methods altogether that are superior to those of traditional learning. So we're going to swing over to the first benefit criteria I chose, and that was the performance realm. So performance-wise, brain stimulation is currently being tested with U.S. Olympic athletes, and that kind of has a little bit more significance this year since the Summer Olympics are coming up. But the article that I found for this kind of shows how Olympic athletes are kind of testing this in order to help them gain a competitive advantage. And what this could really do is help athletes learn and master new skills faster than traditional methods. So you may be able to learn the intricacies of skiing or bobsledding or some team sport more quickly and more thoroughly than you may be through traditional learning methods. And they're doing this by stimulating the particular areas of the brain that control the cognition and retention of these skills. There are also additional performance benefits that can be realized from brain stimulation and manipulation, and these include the increase in reaction time, the lowering of the detection of stimuli, and the increase in rate of recognition, identification, and classification of the stimuli. So the next criteria I decided to highlight was the accessibility. So basically another biotechnology field project that's being undertaken right now is an electric sensor that dissolves into the cerebrospinal fluid. What this is going to help people do eventually, it's still in its infancy stage, but the concept behind it is people will be able to use their brain waves to interact with external devices. So this may help those that have disabilities that may not be able to interact with technology now. This is going to help them use peripherals such as keyboards and other devices that's going to help them interact with not only the technology of today, but the technology of the future. And again, brain stimulation can help make technology more available to everyone, And this is kind of due to the fact that if this electric sensor is realized, you may never actually have to interact with the device physically. It may all be through these brain stimulation. And this is, again, a huge advantage over traditional learning methods, such as pen and paper word processing software, because it opens up the possibilities exponentially. The last criteria I wanted to apply here was the capacity. And a couple recent studies that I was researching have shown that brain stimulation can increase the activities of certain areas of the brain beyond the levels that you may get from traditional learning. And the Georgetown University Medical Center took on a study and found that brain stimulation actually enhanced the capacity of the brain to think more creatively. So this in turn is going to allow people to reach new creative heights in a sense, and it may help spur growth in a number of new areas of technology, as well as it may expand outside the technology to the arts, the sciences, the musics, um, the medical field, as well as others, and it is definitely going to help expand the biotechnology-related fields as well. So, with any emerging technology, and especially something as sensitive and as the brain, there are definitely some risks involved with this. So, when it comes to brain stimulation, the insertion of these electrodes or this type of invasion into the brain, there's always a chance that blood vessels or things of that nature could be punctured, which could lead to complications. There's also a risk of infection with this stimulation, as foreign objects sometimes entering the body are not well received. Another one that I found that isn't necessarily bodily harm, tied to bodily harm, but is important to note, is that the stimulation may not meet the expectations of the patient. So someone may be thinking that this brain stimulation or manipulation is just going to make them almost superhuman, where they'll just be able to, think about all these expansive ideas and have all this creative juice flowing. And it may not, that's not really what brain stimulation is necessarily going to do. But those expectations kind of need to be tempered, because we still do not know all the power or the expectations that that these stimulations can bring. And again, the brain stimulation is still in its infancy phase, so there's so much more development and growth still required before we can even realize if this is something that's a viable option. So just kind of going over what we talked about today. So we found the distinct similarities and differences between the primary learning styles and some of the application development methodologies that we've learned here at LTU. We learned that brain stimulation through biotechnologies has many advantages over traditional learning in the performance, accessibility, and capacity realms, but again, it is still in its infancy stage, so all these technologies are conceptual more than reality at this point. And again, as with any emerging technology, there are always risks that are involved, and we highlighted 4 key risks that were involved with this. Suffice it to say, though, the future of learning is definitely bright in the hands of biotechnology. Here's just a quick references, and if you have any questions, just let me know, and thank you for listening to my presentation today.